welcome to the D-Tools What's the Buzz podcast. I'm Jason Knott, Data Solutions Architect and Evangelist at D-Tools. And with me, as always, is Tim Bigoness, Chief Marketing Officer at D-Tools. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Jason. How you doing? Getting ready for the holidays?
Oh, yeah. I get ready usually the day before the holiday. I'm a late bloomer. So, Tim, we finally did it. We finally did it. Ever since we started the What's the Buzz podcast, we've been waiting to finally make a buzz. And today we finally have.
Absolutely. And, it's finally, things are buzzing here. You're going to hear that word a lot today. We could not have chosen a more appropriate guest for our What's the Buzz podcast than the one and only Buzz Delano of Delano Associates. We're so thrilled to have you here, Buzz. Thanks for taking time to join us today.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate the invitation, the chance to talk with you guys. It's always a pleasure. And so I'm one of the buzzes in the industry. There's Buzz Goddard. He's maybe not doing as much work as in the past. And of course, there's Buzz Jensen at Buzz Jensen Sound Advice with a different business in Arizona. There was a time in the industry when we were all together at Name Your Trade Show, CEDIA, and all kinds of others, where the always wonderful Carol Campbell would get us together and say, I have to have a picture with the industry buzz, all three of us. So that was always fun. And, if you got to have a nickname, you may as well be something that's fun. And Buzz is a good one. People remember it. And quick backstory, it's not my legal name. My parents gave it to me at birth just because they thought kind of a cute nickname as a little kid. Little did they know that I would aspire into it and keep it for a lifetime. And so here we are. So it's been fun. My legal name, for those that don't know, just to drop that in here, is Hugh, H-U-G-H. So legally, I'm Hugh Philip Delano, in case anybody wants to know or cares or mock that. And sadly, rest his soul, Andy Wilcox, he knew my legal name, and I could always hear him over at any trade show or any conference. And of course, Andy, as we remember, he towered over everybody, being like 7 feet tall, and with that large, big voice of his, I could always hear throughout the convention center, Hugh! And I knew that it was Andy.
Well, now I think you've spilled the beans because I've known you for 20 years and I didn't know your name was Hugh. So that's awesome. And yes, I think you'll probably hear that now by more people at the trade shows as we move forward. At least
I'm
to
good with it.
People who listen to our podcast. So
yes,
Jason, myself, and Fred will be fine. So thanks for joining us. You have a long history in the industry in a number of roles. And we always like to kind of get a little bit of the backstory about how our guests have started in the industry, and we always get to hang out at shows. So we're thankful to take this time together, just to catch up in friends. But I think you should share a little bit about your extensive background and then a little bit about what Delano Associates came to be and what you are today.
Certainly, I appreciate the chance to do that. I'll do it real brief, but I'll give the whole CV. Like a lot of us in the industry, back when I was a child, so to speak, I worked at retail audio video in the New York and New Jersey area where I grew up. And I did retail audio during college, and I was a radio DJ and was into audio production and things like that. So audio and sound was always my thing. I did some more retail audio, and then eventually I met manufacturers' reps when I was working at an audio store in Ohio, and I understood what reps did. And I thought it was pretty cool. They drove around and always had the right information and product demos, and they seemed to understand what the dealer was doing and what the manufacturer was doing. I kind of liked that, and I thought, maybe I could try that. So I became a rep in Ohio, and I figured I could learn the business side of the audio industry back in the day. But what I really wanted to do, I wanted to move to California, just because like a lot of people did when they were younger, go to that idyllic place. Yep. And I decided I would work for a manufacturer in California, but becoming a rep kind of taught me the industry, made some contacts. And the short story is I got a job with what is now ATI amplifiers, but back in the day was SAE. And they hired me out in LA, and out I went from Ohio. And so SAE as the Assistant Associate National Sales Manager was my first gig as a factory guy. learned to travel, do dealer shows, dealer meetings, and that wound its way into different dimensions. And eventually, the late, rest his soul, Neil Turk hired me when Turk Technologies, the antennas and accessory company in New York, was beginning to come of age in the early 90s. And I decided to work in the accessory business, partly because I wanted to work with bigger retailers. And that was the thing back in the 90s. All the power retailers were happening, retail AV chains and the mega stores that we all know about, many of whom are gone now. So I worked with Turk from almost a startup, and we grew that to nice numbers. That was real fun. Neil was, if you knew him, was a really clever, creative, very highly motivated guy, and taught me a lot about design and visuals, as well as, of course, antennas. And briefly, that's when I started meeting consultants, and it's a longer story, so we'll touch on it briefly later. But that influenced me a bit to become a consultant later on in my career. So I did Turk for a number of years. And with Turk's success, there was some pressure on me to you should move to New York, Buzz. And I was like, because I always had an office for them in Los Angeles. I didn't want to do that. So custom installation and all of that was really come of age in the mid 90s. And of course, I knew Sonance. I knew Scott and Jeff. We always kind of got along well. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to talk to those guys so I could work for a company in California. And long story short, latter part of the 90s, that's what happened. I joined Sonance and was there in a full-time role for about 5.5 years, essentially, global director of sales and highly involved in other areas of the business as well. And after a certain point in time, despite it going really well, I had a good gig and the company was successful, and they're even more so successful today, of course. And I had a nice job there. I thought I wanted to work a little bit differently in the industry. I made a lot of relationships. And working at Sonance, I learned a lot of other business disciplines, everything from product planning and strategic planning and finance and marketing. I wasn't limited to just being the guy in charge of sales. It was a great environment. And I had relationships, I traveled the world and all that. And I thought, I could be a consultant. And decided at a certain point I would do that. And a person that helped me really make that decision was John Sternberg. Also, sadly, rest in peace, dear John. He had become a consultant for a number of years after a factory career with a number of companies, DBX and Infinity and things. He was a dear friend of mine. And so, and at the end of '03, I spoke to the owners at Sonance, Scott and Jeff, explained what and why I wanted to do. They were a bit surprised. They didn't want to see me go, but they were respectful and encouraged it to go out on your own. And so that's when I started Delano Associates. A few months later, they were like, hey, we could use you as a consultant. So that was pleasant. Enjoyed that a lot. Did a lot of things as a consultant for Sonance through about 2012, but had a lot of other consulting work in the meanwhile, which was great. So I wanted to become a consultant so I could work in a more diverse way, and I wanted to travel more. I was finding myself in the office a lot as Sonance was growing, and while that was important, kind of wasn't me. So I wanted to be out and about and work with, different companies and different products and things. And the consultancy brought me that. And that's largely why I went and did it. And it gave me the opportunity to put a bit more time into volunteerism in the industry, to become more involved with CEDIA and other events and the CES committees and things like that I really wanted to do. I wanted to give to the industry. And of course I learned from. So that's why I started Delano Associates, and I've been blessed it's worked. I didn't know if it would. I took a shot at it, but I put some time into it and created a brand and a logo and a position and identity, all the right things you do for a business. And I've been rewarded ever since with a lot of support from companies in the industry, also in the commercial space. Most have been manufacturers, but a few dealers and distributors along the way. And there's been startups, company reorgs, company repositions, you name it. So that's what I've enjoyed doing and continue to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a long and varied experience in the industry. I think when we first met, when I first came on D-Tools, you were still consulting a bit, I believe, with Sonance, and did the iPort and some of those.
Yes.
And John
that was
Sternberg, was one of the first people that I worked with when I got to D-Tools as well. Just a dear man. Absolutely. So Okay, so your latest initiative is something you were telling me about a few months ago. You're calling it Delano News Advance.
Yes. Hmm.
How's that? A, how's it going? B, what exactly is it? Why'd you start it? And what are some of the things that you're doing there?
Thanks for asking. So, about a year ago, I started thinking about what can I do that is, if you will, something that can bolt on to the Delano Associates consultancy and that it can extend what I do, maybe expand some relationships, but also begin to communicate back some of what I've learned as a consultant and something that I could do while I'm traveling and also, home office, remote worker. And I've always been comfortable talking to a lot of people and having conversations. I feel like I'm a pretty good relationship and connecting person. I thought, what if I had some type of communication or, newsletter art, vehicle in the industry? And for a while, I wasn't really sure how I would do it, but it kept coming up as an idea. And eventually I thought, I'm going to do it. And I started trying to think about all the other really good newsletters and publications and interview sites in this industry. And we have a bunch of them. And I thought, well, I think there's room for another. And I think there's room for one with my voice that might be a little bit different than some of the others, with my industry experience in the trenches and in the office with manufacturers, global, and not being a product guru, but being conversant in most product applications and being on a lot of job sites with integrators. I thought, I think I could develop a well-rounded newsletter and website and series of interviews with people in the industry. And as I wound my way through that, earlier this year and then into the springtime, I was committed to doing it. In my head and a few notes in my computer, I had some ideas. And I don't know, roughly about June, I started really knuckling down, thinking, if I'm going to do something, I should at least have it fairly mapped out, maybe even live by CEDIA Expo. Because, that's a time when everybody gets together. But at the same time, it's hard for people to focus on something new. So I had to be respectful of that, but I did it. And eventually I thought, what am I going to call it? I thought, well, it's about news in the industry, but I didn't really want it to be a news site. I wanted to promote within our trade and hopefully beyond as the time goes forward, promote our profession. And I like to call residential AV technology business a profession more than a trade or an industry, because it really is a profession. No matter what you're doing in it, company CEO, product engineer, sales manager, tech, anything, integrator. It's a profession after all these years. So I wanted to promote the smart home profession, which is really the era that we're in. Smart home covers everything from sound to video, everything comfort and entertainment, I'd like to say. So I thought, that's it. And I kept thinking, Delano, my name, it's out there. I may as well use that. That way it kind of squares up. Maybe there's a little bit of equity in that. News, insightful news, not just, who hired who and right, who's got, the greatest widget here. Which is important, but I wanted to be more insightful and thought leadership based than that. Yeah. And somewhere along the way, I thought, well, to promote, and I thought, wait a minute, the verb is advance, move things forward, make things better. And literally I thought Delano News Advance. I was like, I probably said it out loud like I've done here. And I'm like, that's DNA. Well, Delano DNA. Tim, Jason, instantly, I went to the internet. The domain, Delano DNA, was available. Called my host, buy it, grabbed it. Wow. And I couldn't come up with something better from that point. So Delano DNA, that's kind of the genesis of it all. And that's how the name came up. So obviously, worked with someone here and in the St. Petersburg, Florida area, where I now am after about 2 years, and built a website for it and kind of got the ideas together in a newsletter format and, pushed out the early version of it, just before Expo. But then since then, I've been working hard and traveling and doing interviews with integrators and electrical contractors and some designers that are going to be coming out. And I think I've put out 3 or 4 newsletters. I'm looking to do every other week as content grows and as some other groups come in and help me out with it. So I feel like it's going well. I've got a nice subscriber base. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm getting more comfortable doing things like that. But I'm engaging with all types of people in the industry to share best practices and thought leadership peer-to-peer. And I will tell you guys that the interview format that I find that I like the most, that works best, is having two people, two different integrators as examples, kind of feeding off each other, as we know that integrators will often do. So a recent example of that was Ed Gilmore and Keith Cottrell, both, top guys and top businesses in New York City.
Yep.
So I feel pretty good about where it is now after just barely 3 months.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm subscribing, and I've actually really, really enjoyed the content that you're doing. It's been very insightful. So just real quick, you mentioned Ed and you mentioned Keith's conversation, and I know you've done several, been putting out the newsletters and things. What are some of the key things you've learned from these discussions you've had with various integrators? And has anything in general surprised you?
Yeah, well, what I'll start with is, for those of us who have been in the industry, the profession for a long time, as we certainly have, and there's a lot of things that are always the same. There's a lot of just-in-time management that integrators have to deal with. There's change orders in projects. There's obviously client shifts and changes in preferences, and there's cash flow issues for integrators. Those things still exist, even though maybe they're a little bit different today. But what I'm finding is more integrators, no matter what their scale is, they're getting better organized. I think some of the more recent owners of businesses that are integrators, whether they've been around for a long time or if they're starting newer and let's say, 10 years or less, I notice more owner principals feeling more confident to share information with their other employees than I might have, say, 15, 20 years ago. There used to be a bit of a silo with some of the bigger organizations, and now it seems like non-owners in the businesses, a lot of them tend to know more about where the company is going and have a greater voice. So I think that's good for businesses. Hopefully it's a trend for small businesses in general in all professions, but I see it in our trade kind of as a generational change. I'll tell you one of the things that caught me off guard, but once Ed and Keith talked about it in our interview, that really surprised me. But like I said, it made sense when especially in the context of working in Manhattan and let's say the 5 boroughs there around New York City, was the fact they have such a short workday. I don't mean workday in the office or thinking on your way to work and at home and all that. For the integrators, for the technicians, they said they really have a 5-hour workday to be in the field to get things done on a project, especially in Manhattan. And it has to do with the logistics of New York, the dense traffic, mass transit, and a lot of times working with client reps, building management, other trades, unions. Sometimes they can't get into high rises in the city until 9:30 or 10 in the morning, yet they have to be there early. They often have to be out at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock at the latest, so they have to be preparing. Same thing with large scale estates. So they really have a shorter window of time to do the installation work on site. And that's a challenge that I had never thought of. So they really have to be efficient with their days, and they also have to adapt to those dynamic factors that happens to everybody in any market, but especially so in New York. So I found that kind of fascinating. But of course, Keith with electronic environments and Ed with AHT Global, they've both been at this a long time. So probably no surprises to them. It's just a question of, how they deal with and support their staff.
Now, that's interesting, and obviously that lends itself to what D-Tools does with the scheduling within the software and how important time management can be. What are some of the things that you're hearing from integrators, beyond what you just mentioned there, in terms of how they might be utilizing software for their business improvement? Have you gotten into that at all in the conversations?
A little bit. It's actually, it gave me a good idea for a future interview to find a couple integrators to talk more specifically about that. So, note to self, thanks. What I have seen is integrators are using technology more. They're getting better organized. As we all know, even the largest businesses in our profession are still considered small businesses. And there's a lot of, sometimes you're flying by the seat of your pants in this industry, and you have to respond to clients and changes rather than really getting organized. So I still see a lot of dealers having a challenge setting their priorities and having an organized week and keeping meetings on track internal. But I see more and more of them using organized software. And I've got to believe that as, AI comes along, the ability to manage yourself and find softwares especially if you use a software package that can integrate your self-organization as well as your business projects, such as D-Tool. I think as that comes along, I got to believe that's going to make it easier for small businesses to stay organized and stay on their priorities.
Yep. One last area I want to touch on because we're bumping up against the time, and that's some technology. You do have on your Delano DNA, you talk about fiber and you talk about invisible speakers and some various technologies. What are you hearing out there from a technology standpoint that integrators are embracing? And is there anything that seems to be particularly hot or cold?
Well, really quickly on the reason, fiber and invisible speakers. I've been involved with a number of companies that are in those categories. It's a longer conversation to why, but I'm fascinated by both. As we know, fiber is great, much better than copper wire. Of course, it's more challenging to work with and has a different cost basis, but it's great. I mean, invisible speakers, that's the ultimate visual design for sound. And there's a lot of nice ones out there. So I like those, but I'm an audio guy, so I'm fascinated by all things with sound. Everybody would probably acknowledge this, lighting and window treatments, shading and motors, something are certainly huge in our trade, whereas they were coming on, let's say 10 years ago. And obviously lighting, the advent of low voltage, technology has really enabled that for our trade. Lighting and windows, of course, you get to do them all over the house, kind of like distributed audio. So they're of high value to the dealers. So everybody's in on that. So, any integrator that isn't really fully committed to and learning more or already planning and working with lighting and shades really needs to get on the stick and figure out a way to do that. And the other thing, and this is something we've all talked about, is, and I think it's coming along, I think it's accelerating a bit, but, dealers working with builders. We've all known that that's really key. I can think of many, many dealers who most of their projects come as a result of builder relationships. I can think of an equal number of integrators around the country, big and small, different markets, where they struggle or don't really focus on builders. So it's an opportunity. And I'm just hoping that as we see generational changes and maybe some younger builders coming in and appealing to younger clients, maybe some of the integrators can find their way to building relationships with some of the newer builders that aren't totally wedded to the old ways of builder relationships with other partners. So lighting, shading, anything that's design oriented in technology to make things work well and look nice in the home, and finding ways for integrators to get smarter, more effective with home builders, I think is where they should focus.
Yeah, and I think that's probably that's a topic all on its own that we could delve into, and probably be a great topic for one of your future podcasts as well. Well, I mean, this has been great, Buzz. It's always great catching up. They're always short, but we could keep going. But if one of our
Yes.
listeners wants to get in touch with you and find out more about Delano Associates and DNA, what should they do and how they contact you?
Well, let's see. The old-fashioned easy way to do it, my mobile number, which you can call or text, is area code 949-370-2217. My email is buzz@DelanoAssociates.com. So either one of those should be the best way to reach out. And of course, I've got DelanoAssociates.com as my consulting site. And more recently, DelanoDNA.com is where you can see the newsletter, the podcast, and the YouTube channels.
Awesome.
All right.
So Tim and Jason, thank you. And also, I'm really, congratulations, and I'm sure it's going to be great. We have to talk more about it offline. Your conference that's coming up in February. I think that's going to be really spectacular.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the plug.
Yes.
February 23rd through 25th in Atlanta. Anybody who's listening, please go to the D-Schools website and you can register. It's going to be great information. And Buzz, I can't thank you enough. You probably don't remember, but you gave me, I think, the tour of the Sonance facility in 2000. So
Yes.
that's going way back. But I will say that we will not be renaming this podcast What's the Hue. So it's going to stay What's the Buzz. Sorry.
Oh, thank goodness.
It'll be huge.
I think that's a wise choice.
All right.
Well, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to see you and hear you. And I enjoyed the chance to talk with you today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remind everybody who's listening, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or whatever your streaming platform, or you can watch us on the D-Tools YouTube channel. Again, thanks for listening. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Buzz.